super excited that you chose to be here with me and be part of the Secrets to Becoming a Master Storyteller live training. Super excited that you're here right now. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So hopefully by now you have grabbed a notepad, you've grabbed a pen, and of course, I just want to welcome you to this very powerful live training. And so first of all, before we go ahead and get started, let me just tell you this. I just want to give you absolute confirmation that you are in the right place. If you're in the right place, if you have been trying to figure out how you can have a little more influence. In other words, you are in a leadership position, or you are in the process of growing your own movement, or you're looking to expand your brand, and you're trying to figure out how you can influence people who are members of your tribe, or even influence people to become a part of your tribe, or to become a paying customer or a client, you are absolutely in the right place. If right now you do some level of speaking, but you've been just trying to figure out how you can take your speaking to the next level, you've been trying to figure out how you can have greater impact, then you are definitely at the right training. If you have products and you have services and you've been trying to figure out different techniques and strategies, and you've been trying to develop your skill set so that instead of you always having to chase behind your customers and chase behind your clients, you're trying to figure out a way that you can connect with them and attract them to your business, attract them to your brand, attract them to your products and your services, you are absolutely in the right place. And so I don't take it lightly that you've decided to register and actually be a part of this training. And I can assure you that I am not here to waste your time, and that you're going to get some great information, some great content that you could apply to your personal life, that you could apply to your business, so that you can have more impact when you're out there looking to influence your various audiences or your customers or your clients, so that you can in fact attract high-paying customers and clients, and so that ultimately you can produce the level of results that you really truly want in your business or within your particular career. And so I just want to give you that confirmation and let you know that you're absolutely in the right place. Now, I know there are some of you who may perhaps you're meeting me for the very first time. My name is Andy Henriquez. I am a storytelling coach. I'm also a speaker and the author of the book, Show Up for Your Life, 7 Principles to Living an Extraordinary Life. I specifically work with speakers, aspiring speakers and coaches, as well as entrepreneurs and executives. And I assist those individuals on how they can come up with their signature story and find their signature story and leverage their signature stories so that they can better connect with their customers, so that they can better connect with their clients, and so that they can have more influence and more impact when they get an opportunity to talk in front of audiences. And so I have had the privilege and the honor to work with high-end executives and also very large companies on different various platforms, specifically helping those executives, some CEOs in some cases, to help them to be able to come up with their signature story and leverage their signature story. So I've worked with executives in companies such as Bacardi. I've worked with executives in the company such as Office Depot. I've worked with executives with Accenture, which is one of the largest consulting firms there is, literally globally. I've worked with executives for a company by the name of Southern Glacier. They are one of the largest distributor of wine and spirits. And I share that with you really not to impress you, but just to simply impress upon you that some of the techniques and the strategies and the things I'm going to be sharing with you are things that high-end executives and major companies have found to be extremely useful. And I believe that these same strategies and techniques are going to be able to help you in your respective businesses, whether you are a speaker, a coach, an aspiring speaker or a coach. If you're an aspiring author and you're looking to maybe perhaps write your first book, or maybe even put out your second book, or if you're simply have a movement, something that you're really passionate about, and you're trying to figure out how to take that movement to the next level, I can tell you that some of these techniques and the strategies that I'm going to share with you are some of the very same skills that I have shared with executives and speakers and coaches that has allowed them to produce some pretty amazing results. As a result of some of the work I've done and some of the things that I've done in my industry, I've had the benefit and the privilege to have been on national television. I've been on the Word Network. I've been on Beacon Television. I've been on Island TV. I've also been featured in the Huffington Post. I've also been featured in Black Enterprise Magazine. And once again, I share all that with you just to let you know that I've put in some work in this particular area, specifically of storytelling. I've had the opportunity to train with some of the best in the industry. People like T. Harv Eker, with Tony Robbins, Brendan Burchard, and also my personal mentor, a gentleman by the name of Les Brown, who's one of the top 5 speakers in the world. And literally, I've had the opportunity to sit at the feet of some of the greats in the industry and be able to learn some great techniques and strategies that have allowed me to build my platform and help other people to be able to come up with their own signature stories so that they can, in fact, be more influential, so that they can, in fact, attract more paying customers and clients. And so if that's something that you've been aspiring to do, I can assure you that you are absolutely in the right place. And so I just want to share with you some of the things that I'm going to share with you so you know why you're going to be sticking around, why we're going to be spending about this next hour or so with one another. I just want to share with you some of the things that we're going to be covering. And so one of the first things I'm going to be sharing with you is exactly how is it that you can pinpoint your signature story. You know, when I work with many of my clients and my one-on-one coaching clients and my coaching clients that are part of some of my group coaching programs, one of the things that many of them toil with and try to have a little bit of difficulty with is trying to figure out what is their signature story. And so most of them are aware of the fact that they have a story, but they're trying to figure out what's their home run story, like what's their signature story? What's the story that they want to be known for? What's the story that they're going to get the most amount of mileage out of? And what is the story they can share over and over and over again? And one of the things that I absolutely love about identifying what your signature story is because one of the things that most of us would agree with, for those of you who are out there who are entrepreneurs, or even if you're working in a corporate setting, I think we would all agree with that many of the skills that we learn, or that maybe perhaps that we learned a year or 2 or 3 years ago, that maybe perhaps today they're no longer relevant. In other words, those skills have become obsolete because things are constantly changing. Technology is changing. The approach that we have to take is changing. The various platforms that are made available to us are always changing. But one of the things that I love about specifically developing your signature story is because this is one of those skill sets that regardless of what happens in the economy, regardless of all the different social media platforms, regardless of all the different new technologies that come out, your story is always going to be something that you can utilize. So your story is something that you can use this year. It's something that you can use 5 years from now. It's something that you could use 10 years from now. And it's something that you could use over 20 years from now. And that's one of the things that I love. And that's why I believe it is so worthwhile to develop this particular skill set, to really work on becoming a master storyteller. And so most people who are extremely influential, if you think about politicians, if you think about major CEOs of major corporations, if you think about people who really are considered thought leaders and influencers, one of the things that they all have in common is that all of them have this unique ability to be able to share and craft stories that really inspire people, that connect with people, that give people something that they can attach to, something that they can relate to, and allows them to ultimately move people to take some type of action. In the case of politicians, they want people to vote for them. In the case of maybe perhaps somebody who is a coach or somebody who is a speaker, they're looking to influence the people that they're coaching or the people that they're speaking to and get them to take some type of action, whether that means to change their life, whether it means to buy their products or their services, whatever it is that it might be. But what I love specifically is that this is one of those skill sets that really never goes out of style. So one of the things that we're going to be covering is really how do you pinpoint, how do you identify what your signature story is so that you can be able to leverage that signature story, not just this year, but for many years to come. And so that's one of the things I'm going to be sharing with you. One of the other things that I'm going to share with you during our time together is really what is it that really makes a story influential. And so it's important that I make this distinction right now, you know, when we're talking about storytelling, and specifically as we go through this training, I'm not talking about just telling stories for the sake of just telling stories. I'm talking about telling strategic stories. I'm talking about telling stories that actually produce a result, stories that produce an outcome. So we're talking about stories that get people to take action, to move forward, maybe perhaps on their goals and their dreams, if you're looking to inspire people. I'm talking about stories that get people to go ahead and sign up for your coaching program or to actually buy your products or your services. I am talking about the type of stories that get people to maybe pull out their check and write a check to support your nonprofit organization, for those of you who maybe have your own nonprofit organization. But ultimately, I'm talking about stories that get people to take action. And so one of the things that's really important is that if you want to have an influential story, there are some key things that must be included in your story in order to be influential. And so I'm going to share what I call the 3 C's, the 3 pillars to an influential story. And I'm going to sort of give you the blueprint so that you can learn how you can apply those 3 pillars to your story so that your story can, in fact, become influential. It's one of those things that's absolutely necessary if you want to have an influential story. You see, it's one thing to just tell a story and it just be entertaining, but ultimately, we want to tell a story that gets people to take action. We want to tell a story that produces an outcome. And so that's one of the key things that I'm going to be sharing with you during our time together. The other thing is that I'm going to share with you is one of the very big common mistakes that people make when they're in the process of trying to share their signature story. And so there is a mistake that so many people make over and over again that significantly reduces the impact of their story. It's one of the mistakes that they make that literally oftentimes dilutes the impact that they can make with the story. And ultimately, when you dilute the story that you're sharing, guess what you also do? You actually end up compromising the outcome. And so if you are sharing the story so that you can influence people and so that you can inspire them, then chances are that you're not going to be as impactful as you wanted to be. If you are sharing the story because you're trying to get more people to buy your products or your services, then chances are your closing ratio or your increase in sales or whatever it is, your conversion rate is not going to be as significant because of the fact that you weren't as effective as you wanted to be in your story. And so there is several mistakes that people tend to make when they're sharing their signature story. And I want to go ahead and help you and keep you from making those mistakes. Some of those mistakes that so many people make, I want to sort of position you so that you don't make those same mistakes. And so that most importantly, so that when you get out there and you start getting out there and sharing your story, so that you can be way more effective and ultimately produce the type of results that you want to do. And then I want to share with you what I believe is what allows your story to be universal. You know, one of the things that I find that many of my coaching students and the people that I work with struggle with is sometimes they try to figure out, they say, well, Andy, you know, I'm trying to figure out when I speak to different audiences or I'm talking to different clients, is my story always relevant? Should I always include my story? And my answer to them is absolutely. You see, your story is really part of who you are. And we've heard this so many times before, that people love to do business with people that they know, like, and trust. And so it's essential that you establish up front as an entrepreneur, as a speaker, as a coach. It's important that you establish up front who you are. And oftentimes you're going to be able to do that by simply sharing your story. And there's some key things that you can do that you can always allow and have your story actually be able to still be relevant and still be able to make it, in other words, be universal. And so in other words, if you were speaking to a group of executives, or if you were speaking to the youth, or if you were speaking to your colleagues and your peers, there's a way that you can always find a way to make your story relevant. But there's something important that needs to be a part of your story always in order for it to have that level of versatility where it's still applicable. And that's something else that I'm going to share with you during our time together. And so I just want to have you just realize this, that you are absolutely in the right place if you have made the clear determination yourself that you want to have more impact, that you want to attract more paying customers and clients. Now, let me just say this. This is not necessarily the training for you if you are the type of individual that you have no intention of actually doing any type of practicing. In other words, you think that just by simply listening in to a very quick training, that is going to make you a master storyteller. And let me just tell you, I do not have any kind of secret formula that is just going to go ahead and make you a master storyteller without you actually making sure that you practice and implement some of the things that I'm sharing with you. And so if you're one of those individuals that you have no intention on practicing anything that I'm sharing with you, this is not the training for you. But if you are the type of individual that once you have something and you know that it works, that you're willing to put in the work, you're willing to actually practice and implement it ongoing so that you can tweak it and get better, then you are absolutely in the right place. Let me say this. This is the other thing. If you're somebody who you are looking to become a better storyteller because your intention is to just simply try to manipulate people, and really you're not coming from a place of sincerity, and you're really just looking to manipulate people so that you can get what you want, this also isn't the right training for you. I'm not into manipulation strategies. I'm into impact strategies. I want to share with you how you can leverage stories and be able to share the story with a great deal of authenticity and sincerity and be able to create impact and move people to take action, not to manipulate people. And so if you're looking for a special manipulation tactics, this also is not the training for you. But if you're looking for solid strategies that's going to allow you to be more impactful, that's going to allow you to produce your results and ultimately get the type of results that you want more consistently, then this is in fact the training for you. And then the other thing is that I have to say is, you know what? This also is not the training for you if there's nothing that you're passionate about. I mean, you're not passionate about what it is that you do. You're not passionate about any particular specific cause. You're not passionate about your products. You're not passionate about your services. If there's nothing that you're passionate about, let me tell you, what I'm going to share with you is not going to work. You see, you've got to have some level of passion. There's got to be some level of conviction. You literally have to have a product or a service or a message or a story. There's got to be something that you're passionate about and that you want to share with the world and that you're prepared to share with the world. And if you have something that you're passionate about, I'm going to share with you a couple of things that I believe that you'll be able to leverage a story and tap into that passion so that ultimately you can produce the type of results that you want. So like I said, if you are in fact a note taker, this is the time that you want to go ahead and make sure that you have your pen handy and that you have your piece of paper. And so let's address one of the very first things that I told you that I was going to cover during our training. And one of the first things I want to address is this, is because many times when I'm working with people, specifically with coaches, with speakers or aspiring coaches and speakers or executives and entrepreneurs, with CEOs, one of the things that they struggle with is really trying to figure out what is their signature story. And so in other words, they're saying, Andy, well, how do I figure out what my signature story is? Listen, I know I have a lot of stories. I realize this, but I'm not quite sure is what's my signature story? Like, what's the one that I'm going to use over and over again? What's going to be my home run story? The one that I'm going to get the most amount of gumption from, the one I'm going to get the most amount of results from. And when they and when they're trying to figure that out, I take them through a unique process. There's actually a questionnaire that I actually have them go through so that they can try to figure out what their story is. But in that questionnaire, there are some key things that I am having them focus on, and I want to share them with you. One of the first things that I have them focus on when they're trying to identify where their signature story is, I want you to look at this, is that they need to focus on is really transitions. And why transitions? I'm talking about because, listen, transition periods in your life are literally gold mines, and it is fertile ground for you to find some of your best and most compelling stories. And so we're talking about the transition in your life, when you made the transition from maybe perhaps working a regular 9 to 5, and you decided to go ahead and start your own business. That is a significant transition. There is typically a story there. I'm talking about the transition where maybe perhaps you have been let go from your job and you decided to go a different career path. There is typically a very powerful story there. And so there's a transition, and maybe perhaps you did something in your life and you decided to go in a completely different direction, and you decided to go in a direction that you had never gone before, and that was a significant transition in your life. There's oftentimes a very powerful story there. You see, as I look at my own personal life and I think about my own personal story, one of my personal stories is about how I made my personal transition from being a CPA. You see, I literally used to be a CPA. I used to work with a very amazing company by the name of PricewaterhouseCoopers. And a question that I get from people a lot of times is say, Andy, how did you go from being a CPA working for a large professional service firm to being a storytelling coach, to being a speaker, to being an author? How did you make that transition? And there's a powerful story there. And so I normally would share with them my story. And so what I share with them is that, that I had basically followed the script. My parents being Caribbean and having come to the United States looking for a better life, one of the things that they told me, they said, Andy, go to school. They said, hey, man, you got to get a good education and get a good job. And I did that. I went to school at Florida State University. I got my master's degree in corporate accounting. While I was in the master's program, I studied like crazy in order to be able to pass the CPA exam, and I landed a job with one of the largest professional service firms in the world, a company made by PricewaterhouseCoopers. But you see, here's what happened in my life. You see, after working for that company for about 3.5 years, I realized that my life was starting to follow a basic routine. You see, I was waking up to the sound of an alarm clock every single day. I mean, I was jumping out of my bed and literally getting into my car, fighting traffic, to get to a place in my life where I knew that something inside me was saying, Andy, there's got to be more than this. And maybe perhaps some of you, as you're listening to me right now, you can relate to that you were showing up to a job, or you were showing up to a set of circumstances in your life, and you were saying to yourself that there's got to be more than that. You see, for me, that was a major transition period in my life where I was thinking about making that transition from literally working this job in this corporate setting to becoming an entrepreneur. And I tell you this, for 1.5 years, I thought about taking a chance on myself. For 1.5 years, I thought about leaving my job in corporate America and trying to figure out what my purpose and what my passion was. And every time I talked myself into it, I would talk myself right back out of it. And then literally, after 1.5 years of contemplating and thinking about it, I finally built up some courage, and I finally made the decision to leave corporate America. And once I made the decision to leave corporate America, I had to start what I call my secondary education. I started to go to seminars and workshops, and I started seeking out people who were powerful speakers. And I found a gentleman by the name of Les Brown, one of the top 5 speakers in the world. And I trained under him, and I was able to learn some of the best techniques and strategies to help me to build my own platform. And today, I get an opportunity to speak for major corporations and train people on how to come up with their signature story so that they too can make a significant impact. And so when I was searching for my story, I had to try to find a place in my life where there was a transition. And so what I need you to understand is this, is that when you're looking for your story, one of places where you can oftentimes find your story is by simply looking at your life and thinking about, where was there a significant transition in your life? Where did you undergo a transition? There's oftentimes going to be a story there. Now, here's another place that you're going to oftentimes be able to find great stories when you're trying to seek out stories. One of the other places that you're going to find them is when you undergo a significant challenge. And so I want you to think about, when you're trying to figure out where is it that you can find your signature story, oftentimes your signature story is also going to be attached to a challenge. And so in other words, I want you to think about this. For some of you, you had to undergo some very, very difficult physical challenges. And so maybe perhaps you went to a doctor, and after going in for a regular checkup, you got a bad diagnosis. And so some of you, as you're listening in right now, that maybe perhaps you have been through a significant challenge. You had a bout, you had to fight cancer or overcome cancer or some type of physical illness, and it was a major, major challenge in your life. For some of you, it wasn't a health challenge. Maybe perhaps it was a financial challenge. And so some of you went through a very difficult period, and you were around when maybe perhaps when the real estate market crashed, and maybe you had to face bankruptcy, or maybe you invested a large amount of money in the stock market and you lost that money. Maybe perhaps you had a very powerful job and you had an amazing salary, and then you lost that job. And what you find there is that maybe perhaps you had a significant challenge that you had to undergo. And so here's what I need you to understand. Oftentimes, you're going to have a great story in that challenge. And so even for me in my personal story, in addition to that being a transition period for me, that was a very challenging period for me. And the challenge that I was dealing with was what you call an internal challenge. You see, every part of me wanted to step out and go after my goals and my dreams and figure out what my passion was. But then there was another part of me that really felt committed to the fact that I spent all this time getting my undergraduate degree in accounting, that I got my master's degree in corporate accounting, that I had studied and I had passed the CPA exam. And so it became very difficult for me. It was a lot of internal challenge, internal struggle between what I wanted and what I was holding on to. And so for many of you, when you're trying to identify where your signature story is, your signature story oftentimes is going to either lie in a transitional period in your life or at a place where you are undergoing a significant challenge. And so those are two of the places where you're very likely to find one of your signature stories. Now, I'm going to show you another place that you oftentimes are going to find your signature story. One of the other places that you're going to find your signature story is what I refer to as DM. And so you say, well, what is DM, Andy? DM is what I call defining moments. If you're a note taker, write that down. Defining moments. All of us, perhaps you've heard of a defining moment. A defining moment is one of those moments that take place in your life that you really discover who you are. It's one of those moments where you really have to tap in and dig deep to know who you are. You know, when I left corporate America back in 2004, many years ago, that for me was a defining moment, right? I had to dig deep. I had to step outside of my comfort zone. I had to be willing to let go of my safety net. I had to literally try to figure out what my passion was. I had to go ahead and just disregard all the fear of failure, the fear of disappointment, the fear of what other people were going to have to think. And so for me, that was a defining moment. Defining moments are moments in your life that when you look back at them, they completely change the trajectory of your life. And so when I look back at when I made the decision to leave corporate America, that is the only reason why you're listening to me right now. It's the only reason why I became a speaker. It's the only reason why I ultimately became an author. It's the only reason why I was able to become a storytelling coach, is because I made that decision at that moment back in 2004 to go ahead and let go of my job in corporate America and go after my goals and my dreams. And so what I need you to understand is this, and when I'm working with my coaching clients, one-on-one or in a group coaching program, we go through a very specialized questionnaire, and the questionnaire is to help them to start focusing on where are those areas in your life where they had transitions, those areas in their life where maybe they had challenges, and those areas in their life where they had defining moments. And oftentimes when we do some investigating and we dig up the stories in those areas, we will often, guess what, discover what their signature story is. And that is where we begin. We first find out what their signature story is, and then we begin to develop it. And then we begin to show them, and I show them how they can position a story so that it can have more impact. So the first thing that I need you to understand and take away from this training is that when you are looking to identify what your signature story is, you need to be pinpointing specifically where you are either going areas in your life where you've undergone a significant transition, areas in your life where you had to face significant challenges, areas in your life where you had what I call defining moments. And if I were to ask you this question, if I were to ask you and I were to say to you, what would you say have been some of your biggest life lessons? Right? If someone said, well, what has been one of your biggest life lessons? If someone were to ask me that question, Andy, what's been one of your biggest life lessons? I would tell them one of my biggest life lessons was the importance of just making sure that you pursue your passion, right? And then they said, well, Andy, what is it that taught you that life lesson? Well, the thing that taught me the importance of pursuing my passion is because for the longest in my life, I was just literally following the course that everyone else told me, right? My parents told me to go to school, get a good education, get a good job. I did that. I went to Florida State University. I got my master's in corporate accounting. I became a certified public accountant. I landed a job at one of the largest professional service firms in the world. But none of that was what I was passionate about. And so it wasn't until back in December of 2004 where I undergone that very difficult transitional period in my life, or when I underwent that defining moment in my life, that I realized the importance of pursuing your passion. And so the reason why I brought that up with you is because oftentimes your best and your greatest life lessons are also going to fall into these categories. Your biggest life lessons are a lot of times are going to show up in transitional periods in your life. They're going to show up during difficult challenges in your life, and they're also going to show up during those defining moments in your life. And so all of these areas are what I call fertile ground. These are the places that you are going to be able to dig up your best stories. These are the places that you're going to be able to pull out the type of stories that's going to allow you to make a significant impact, and the type of stories that you're going to allow people to relate with you and connect with you at an entirely different level. Now, it's important that you understand why we want to be able to share these stories. You see, part of the reason why we want to share these stories is because these stories, when we share our personal truth, when we share our transitions, when we share our challenges, when we share our defining moments, we give our customers, we give our clients, we give our audience something that they can connect to. And without us having to instruct them and say, hey, find a way to connect to my story, human beings are hardwired, and we're always trying to find a way to connect and relate. And so by us unveiling and sharing our story, people are going to find a way to connect with it. So as I touched up on my story, some of you are thinking, well, Andy, man, I tell you, I can relate to being at that place in my life where I said, you know what? I want more out of life. There's got to be more than this. Some of you are saying, you know what? I'm still working a corporate job, Andy, and I've been thinking about pursuing my passion. Or some of you have said, Andy, I did the same thing you did. I was working a corporate job, and I decided to pursue my passion. Some of you are going to say, oh, Florida State University. Oh, I attended Florida State University. We're going to always try to find a way to relate. And so we want to find our stories so that we can give our customers, our clients, and the people that we're connecting with something that they can relate to, something that they can connect to, because that's going to allow us to have more impact and more influence on them when they buy into who we are and they find out that in many ways we're just like them. When they find out in many ways that we have something to connect with. So the first thing I need you to understand, when you're trying to pinpoint what your story is, you're going to find and you're going to focus on the areas in your life where you've undergone transitions, areas in your life where you've undergone some challenges, and areas in your life where maybe perhaps you have had some defining moments. I mean, those moments in your life where things just completely turn around and change on your behalf. And so that's one of those things that's really, really, truly essential. Now, here's one of the other things that I have to assist many of my coaching clients with, is that they often say, well, Andy, how is it I've seen you, maybe they've seen me share my stories, or they've witnessed some of the other people out there share their stories, and they say, man, it's so amazing that when they share their story, how they can get people to take action, how they can get people to tap into their emotion, how they can get people to stroke a check or whatever it is that they're looking to influence people to do. And they sort of say, well, is there any type of a structure for an influential story? Like, how is it that I can make my story influential? And so I want to give you what I call really the 3 pillars to an influential story. Like, one of the things that you really cannot get away from when you want to, in fact, have an influential story, when you want to have a type of story that gets people to take action, there are some key elements that you need to make sure that you include in your story. And I want to share those things with you real quick. So just give me a quick moment so I can pull this up for you, okay? So there's basically 3 pillars, 3 things that are essential if you want to have an influential story. There are three things. And when we're talking about influence, we're talking about the kind of story that gets people to take action. The type of story that gets people to buy your products, to buy your services, the type of story that gets people to join your movement, the type of story that gets people to maybe perhaps decide to support your nonprofit organization. And so we're talking about truly influential stories. And so there are three main pillars to an influential story. The very first pillar is this, and I want you to pay attention closely here. One of the first keys to an influential story is that you need to build up what we call the context. There needs to be context in your story. We say, well, Andy, what is the context? All right. Context to your story is the key elements to get the individual, the audience, the customers, and the clients to really be able to get an understanding of the story that you're about to share with them. And so it's during this point in the story is when you introduce the setting, right? You remember back in the day when you were in grade school and they're showing you how to write a paper, you had to come up with the who, what, when, where, why, right? So that's context, right? We're introducing the key characters in the story. Oftentimes you will be one of the key characters in the story. We're painting and we're giving people a timeline, like when did this take place? We're actually introducing to them perhaps exactly the key elements that they need to know so that the story that you're about to share with them is going to make sense. And this is one of those things that, guess what? You cannot overlook. You cannot overlook the context. And I tell you this is why. You ever had somebody with a lot of excitement try to start telling you something and then you were sort of like, whoa, slow down, what you're talking about? And the reason why you had no idea what they were talking about is because most likely there was a lack of context. There wasn't enough context there. And so you weren't very clear on what it is that they were going to share, or you weren't very clear on what it is, what the point ultimately that they wanted to make. And so it was essential that they gave you the right context. And so I need you to understand that that's one of those key elements when you're going to share an influential story. You have to know and you have to be very clear on what are the key elements that you need to include in the context so that you can give your customer, your clients, and your audience enough information so that they can follow along with you in your story. Now, I can tell you a major mistake that many people make is that when they're building out their context, guess what they do? They put in far too much information, right? And so what ends up happening is that is when someone's in the process of telling your story and they give you all of these extra details. And as you're listening to the story, you can't help but wonder and say to yourself, what is the point? What is the point that you're trying to make? You're saying so much, and I don't know what's relevant. I don't know what's important to the story and what's not. And so one of the key things that when I'm coaching my clients is helping them to understand in this part of building out their influential story, what parts of their story is relevant and what parts of their story is irrelevant. Now, here's one of the things that I need you to understand. I want you to write this down. Here's one of the key things that you need to understand. When you are trying to figure out the context of your story, when you come across a particular detail or information within your story, and you realize that that information is not necessary for someone to be able to follow along, or it doesn't necessarily add more value to your story. If it's not necessary to the story, then it is necessary that you exclude it from the story. I'm going to say that one more time. If that information is not necessary to your story, then it is necessary that you exclude it from your story, right? And so as you're sort of mapping out and you're thinking about your story and you're jotting down all the details of your story, what you're going to find is there's going to be some details that are perhaps not exactly relevant. They're not necessarily anything that's going to add any additional value to your story. If anything, they actually take away from your story. And if that is the case, then it's important that you remove them from the context of your story. And so we refer to that as streamlining your story. And that is when we go through your story, it's one of the exercises that I do with my coaching clients is we actually build out and build a story timeline. And the purpose of us building out their story timeline is to make sure that we identify the key elements to their story, and so that we also know which are the key elements that should be excluded from their story and which are the key elements that should also be included in their story. And so when you're building out the context to your story, one of the things that's essential is that you have a system in place, a process in place, so that you can understand what is relevant to your story and what is irrelevant, what is adding value to your story and what is actually taking away from your story. And there's a process to undergo that, but I need you to just simply understand, if you're looking to have an influential story, you need to build out enough context so that your customer, your client, your audience can follow along. But you also need to make sure that you're not putting in so much information and so much irrelevant information that people are not able to actually follow along. And so that is one of the key elements to an influential story, is being able to build out and map out the context. Now, here's the second C to an influential story, is all influential stories actually have some type of conflict, right? And so when you are building out an influential story, all of your context is ultimately building up to the conflict. And so the story needs to have some type of a conflict. And so sometimes the conflict is man versus man or woman versus woman. And so the conflict sometimes is between you and another human being, right? It's between you and your spouse. It's between you and a business partner. It's between you and somebody who maybe did something to you. And so the conflict sometimes is between you and someone else. Sometimes the conflict is between you and maybe your environment. Maybe it's something that happened between you and like the economy. And so maybe the stock market crashed, or maybe perhaps the real estate market crashed, or maybe perhaps it was something that took place within your environment in which you got let go from your job, or something happened in your environment that ultimately has caused a significant conflict. And finally, the last type of conflict, so there's a conflict sometimes where it's between you and someone else, conflict between you and your environment, the economy, or whatever it might be. And there's also the conflict where it's between you and, guess what, yourself. We call that internal conflict. And so when I was referring to my own story, I had internal conflict, right? There was a part of me that wanted to go after my goals and my dreams, that wanted to become a professional speaker, that wanted to figure out what my passion was. But then there's another part of me that was holding on to my comfort zone, that was holding on to my corporate job, that was holding on to what I knew. There was one part of me that wanted the adventure and wanted to expand, and there's another part of me that wanted to hold on to what was comfortable. And so for me, that was internal conflict. Every influential story has some type of conflict. There's some type of conflict that is taking place. And so when you're building out your story, it's essential that when you're building out the context, you're building out the context so that ultimately it all builds up to what the conflict is. So what the conflict in your story was, so that people can understand, wow, okay, this is what took place here. The conflict is when maybe perhaps you had to start the job or you had to start the business with minimal funds. Maybe the conflict is you being diagnosed with a life-altering disease. Maybe the conflict is when you got let go from your job. Maybe the conflict is that when your finances fell through and you are facing bankruptcy. There's always going to need to be conflict in your influential story. So we build out the context, and all of the context is building up to this moment of conflict. And then once we get to the conflict, guess what we've got to do? We've got to build out the conclusion, right? And so we've got to find a way to sort of summarize the story and then ultimately make a point. And so one of the things that was shared with me by one of my mentors and that I share with people often is one of the key elements that's really important is that you understand this, that storytelling is a tool. It is a specific tool, and it is a strategic tool. And so because it is a tool, it is something that you should utilize so that you can ultimately impart something, or that you can ultimately be able to get a specific outcome. And so when you share a story, there needs to be some type of a conclusion so that you can get people to take action, so that you can go ahead and impart a specific point, a specific strategy, or a specific lesson with the people that you're actually addressing. And so at some point, you've got to conclude your story. There's got to be some type of a takeaway. One of the things that I share with people, that was shared with me by one of my mentors, is you never want to tell a story without making a point. Write this down. Never tell a story without making a point, and never make a point without telling a story. And so every time we share a story, there should be some type of a point or a reason why we decide to share our story, right? And so when I share my story, there are many different points that I can make, but one of the points that I make people is just telling them the importance of making sure that they follow their passion. And I tell them that maybe perhaps like me, they have found themselves going through life where they were going through the motion. And maybe perhaps they were pursuing something because somebody else told them that it was a good idea. And maybe perhaps they were pursuing something because it's something that they've been doing for quite some time, and it's within their safety zone, right? And so that ultimately at some point, we have to be willing to forfeit what is comfortable so that we can embrace what we've been called to do. And at some point, we have to be brave enough to get out there and pursue our passion. And for me, my defining moment was back in December of 2004, which was quite some time ago, was my moment where I decided that I was going to go ahead and pursue my passion. And no, I didn't have it all figured out. Yes, I was afraid. Yes, I had to undergo some struggle and some disappointments, but guess what? Ultimately, I figured it out. And I believe that if anybody wants to have a fulfilling life, if you want to be able to live a life of purpose and be able to make significant impact, guess what? The only way you're going to do that is if you are literally operating within your purpose, within your calling. And so when we think about our stories, we have to always be, if we want an influential story, we want to think about what are these three pillars and how we can map out these three pillars in our story. And so we got to be thinking about what's the context in our story, right? What is the conflict in our story? And then also, what is the conclusion? And in the conclusion, we want to go ahead and share a takeaway, something in the story that we want to impart, that we want to give to people that they can actually be able to digest and sort of take away with them so that we're able to actually influence them. That's the beautiful things about story. You see, what I love about story is, regardless of what industry you're in right now, right? And so if you are an entrepreneur, if you are working for a company and you're just a part of the reason why you're listening into this training is because you want to be a more effective communicator, you want to have more influence, you want to be a better leader, or maybe perhaps you're an aspiring speaker or a coach. Regardless of what industry you are in, one of the things that most of us would probably be able to agree with is that we are all, most of us, right? We're trying to impart something, right? We're trying to influence someone. We're trying to influence our staff. We're trying to influence our customers and our clients. We're trying to influence our audience. And so the beautiful thing about story is whatever it is that we're trying to deliver, stories have this unique ability to be able to help us to do it with a little more style, right? Stories give us the ability to do it and to do it a little more effectively, right? And so if you're a speaker, stories help you to become a more effective speaker. If you're a marketer, stories allow you to become a more effective marketer. If you are a leader, stories allow you to become a more effective leader. And so it's one of those skill sets that regardless of what industry you're in, it helps you to do a little more. And so one of the things that I share with people all the time is that all of us are normally have something that we're trying to impart to people, right? We got our products, we got our services, we have our ideas, we have our movements, we have our books, whatever it is that we're trying to sort of impart and influence people to sort of accept and take on as their own. And so one of the things that I share with people all the time is that story in many ways serves as a very unique tool. And let me just share this with you. I used to have this German Shepherd. Her name is Jasmine. And unfortunately, after having Jasmine for about 6 years, I noticed that something was wrong with Jasmine, and I took her into the veterinarian. And what I discovered is that unfortunately, Jasmine had a very rare autoimmune disease, a degenerative autoimmune disease, which means that over time, her health would deteriorate and become worse and worse. And because I love Jasmine so much, I was constantly taking her to the vet and trying to find all kind of alternative treatments to be able to help her out. And so she had to undergo a cold laser therapy. She was undergoing acupuncture. Yes, acupuncture for dogs. And one of the things that the vet also gave me was a series of pills, one of them being steroids, to be able to help Jasmine so that she can go ahead and be able to build her muscle and her stamina so that she didn't deteriorate as fast. And I remember very vividly when the vet gave me this bottle of pills and showed me and gave me the instructions to go ahead and give these pills to my dog every day. And I remember heading on home with my bottle of pills to give these pills over to my dog. And I remember getting home, and here's a crazy thing. I took these pills and I was trying to give them to my dog. And I'm telling you, the vet was able to give the pills to Jasmine, but listen, it did not work out that way for me. I mean, I tried to give Jasmine these pills. First of all, she was giving me a hard time to open up her mouth. She would spit the pill out, or she would chew it, and then I would find the little pieces of the pill all over the place. And I was like, you know what, this is crazy. I cannot get this dog to go ahead and eat these pills. And so I remember calling the vet and saying, listen, I tried to give Jasmine these pills. She's not taking these pills. You told me to give Jasmine these pills twice a day. It's not working. And so the vet said, hey, listen, do you have any peanut butter, or do you have some of Jasmine's favorite meat? I said, yeah, I got peanut butter. And so she said this. She said, take the pills and put it inside of a little bit of peanut butter and then try to give it to Jasmine. And I thought it was crazy, right? First of all, I didn't even know that dogs could eat peanut butter. So I took the pill, I slapped it inside of some peanut butter. I called Jasmine. Jasmine. She came over to me. I opened up my hand, had the peanut butter, pill inside, and she ate all the peanut butter out of my hand. And in doing so, she also ate the pill. And I was just blown away, because from that moment on, I had no more problems actually getting Jasmine to digest the pills that I was giving her. And so here's what I need you to know, that you have your own unique pill. Sometimes it might be your product, it might be your service, it might be a powerful message, it might be your book. There's something that you want to share with people. There's something that you want to impart with people. And what I need you to understand is this, that your story is the peanut butter. It's within your story. That's where you go ahead and talk about your amazing products. That's where you talk about your amazing services. That's where you go ahead and share the amazing strategies or the inspiring messages that you want to share with your audience. If you can learn to put these things in a story, you make them that much more palatable, and the people who are around you will literally be able to digest what it is that you're sharing so much better. And so it's one of those things that's just essential for all of us, that when we're looking to be able to take our storytelling, if we want to become a master storyteller, it's important that we understand just the significance of story and how stories ultimately serve as the peanut butter to help us to take things to an entirely different level. Things down pretty quickly, but before I do that, I just want to sort of recap, and I want you to think about some of the things that I shared with you. Number one of the things that I share with you is that when you're trying to identify where your key and your signature story is, that there are some places that you should typically look. And that is, number one of the transitional periods in your life, also the places where you have undergone some significant challenges, and also DM, those defining moments in your life. If you focus on those areas in your life, guess what you're probably going to find? You're probably going to find some of your best stories. And I'm talking about the kind of stories that if you begin to work on them, if you begin to develop those stories, you would literally be able to find your signature story and make a significant impact in the life of others. And so these are the areas that I normally focus on when I'm working with my coaching clients to help them identify where their signature story is. Now, all of us don't want to just share stories, right? We want to share influential stories. And when you're sharing influential stories, the three main pillars in an influential story is that you've got to have context. This is where we sort of map out and we build out the most important key elements of our story. This is where we introduce the characters. This is where we introduce the time, the setting. But one of the major mistakes that people make is when they're sharing the context is they put way too much information when they're sharing the context, right? And so they put a lot of stuff that's irrelevant. And so one of the things that I often take my coaching clients through is building out a story timeline. And so it's important that you be able to identify what are the key elements to your story that add value to the story and what does not add value. Remember what I told you. If it is not necessary to the story, meaning it does not build value, if it is not a key element of context, then it is necessary that you remove it from your story. Remember that I told you that. That is a key element to help you to keep from making a common mistake that many people make when they're actually mapping out their story. The other thing is, I need you to understand is all great stories have conflict. Now, remember what I told you, there's different types of conflict. There's conflict where it's you, man versus man, woman versus woman, you and somebody else, right? The conflict between you and somebody else, you bump heads, the business partner that left you high and dry, the spouse that divorced you and left you, you know, the person that betrayed your trust. It's the conflict between you and somebody else. And then also there is what I refer to as the conflict between you and like the environment. Maybe the economy change. Maybe that there's a crash in the real estate market, something external. And we watch movies, right? There's a conflict where it's like a tornado or hurricane, external. And then there's the internal conflict, right? That's a conflict that's happening within yourself. That is always makes for a great conflict line. And then finally, we need to make sure that there's some type of conclusion so that we can make a point and that we can get people to take some kind of action. Because remember, stories need to make one specific purpose. And so you need to know up front for your story, what is the one point that you're looking to make? Don't try to make a whole gazillion, trillion different type of points, but what is the one point that you can make that's going to allow you to have the level of impact that you really, truly want to make? It's one of those things that is really, really, truly important. Every great story has a powerful, compelling conclusion, a message, a point, right? And so remember what I told you. You never want to tell a story without making a point, and you never want to make a point without telling a story. Now, my time with you is really winding down, but I tell you this, if you've been enjoying some of the content that I've been sharing with you, and you yourself know that you either have a message that you want to share with the world, that maybe perhaps you are doing some speaking right now, and you want to elevate your game, you want to take your speaking to the next level, or maybe perhaps you've been just trying to figure out how that you can increase your skill set, your storytelling skill set, so that you can attract more paying customers and clients, then you're really going to enjoy what I have to share with you next. I want to talk to you about a very special opportunity. I have what is called the Master Storyteller Academy. This is a very powerful group coaching program. And this group coaching program, I'm going to be working with a very small, intimate group of individuals, literally less than 10 individuals. And we are going to do a deep dive and working with each person individually in this group setting to help you to, number one, figure out, guess what your signature story is, to really be able to help you to hone down on what your signature story is and help you to find out and figure out how you can apply that very powerful what I showed you, that influential story structure to your story, and also be able to help you to really be able to share your story in such a way that you can really be able to make tremendous impact. So this very powerful 6-week transformational coaching program is called the Master Storyteller Academy. And so I want to extend an invitation to you to join my Master Storyteller Academy. Now, I'm just going to give you a very slight overview of what the Master Storyteller Academy. First of all, it's a 6-week program. And so this is a powerful 6-week transformational program, and each week we're going to be covering a different module. And so regardless of where you are located, you're going to be able to participate because we're going to be covering these modules. These are going to be happening really virtually, and so you can literally be able to join these live training sessions from the comfort of your home. You're going to be able to join me in a conference call system. You'll be able to dial in as I cover the different modules. And I'm going to share with you what those modules are, but I just wanted to let you know that you're going to be able to participate in this 6-week transformational coaching program remotely. But the beautiful thing is this 6-week transformational coaching program is going to conclude with a live training event. So all the things that you would have learned as you've gone through the previous weeks in this transformational coaching program in the Master Storyteller Academy, during the live training event, you're going to have an opportunity to practice and actually implement the storytelling strategies that I've been taking you through in the previous weeks. And so this is not just one of those things where you're just sort of learning this information in your head, but you're going to get an opportunity to actually practice sharing and telling your story and receiving live feedback from me as I go ahead and sort of coach you through how to make your story better, and so that you can be more influential, so that you can produce the type of results that you want. And so right now, you can start heading over there right now. If you want to open up a separate browser, you want to go to Master Storyteller Academy so that you can get more of the details. And I'm going to continue to share with you some of the details. But just so that you know, if you want to go ahead right now and just head over there so you can get some more of the details, you can go to masterstorytelleracademy.com. Once again, that is masterstorytelleracademy.com. Now, let me just continue here very quickly. This is a 6-week transformational coaching program that is designed to help you to really be able to become a master storyteller. The beautiful thing is you also are going to be able to participate in this coaching program remotely, and then we will conclude with a live training session, and you will have ample amount of time to make the arrangements to be able to fly in to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It tends to be the place that we host the live training session, so that you can go ahead and do a deep dive and really be able to share all of the techniques and the strategies that I've been sharing with you throughout the Master Storyteller Academy, and be able to receive the live feedback that I'm telling you is literally invaluable. I can't even put a price tag on the value that you receive from getting the live feedback and actually practicing implementing your storytelling at this actual live training. Now, during these 6 weeks, we're going to be sharing different modules and really covering some different modules. So I just want to share with you very quickly the different modules. So week 1, the very first module that we're going to be sharing is number 1, I'm going to help you to pinpoint your signature story. So if you recall, I was talking about how oftentimes we find your signature story during times of transition, during times of challenges, and also during times that I call your defining moments, where I'm going to take you through the process that I take many of my one-on-one coaching clients through to help you to go through and identify what your signature story is. So during week 1, we're going to identify your signature story. And so you're going to go through a very powerful questionnaire that is designed to get you to start dig up and start pulling out your very best stories, but ultimately to help you to identify what your signature story is. And I'm going to help you through that process to identify what is in fact your signature story. Now, during week 2, here's what we're going to be covering. I'm going to show you how you can customize your story regardless of who your audience is. And so one of the things that you recall, one of the challenges that many of my coaching clients have is they say, Andy, well, when is my story relevant? When is it not relevant? Or based off of this audience, how do I share my story? So I'm going to show you how you can customize your story and make sure that your story is relevant regardless of who your audience is, regardless of who it is that you're addressing. And so there is a unique strategy for you to implement to make your story universal so that you can always be able to share and tell your story. And so I'm going to show you how to do that during week 2 of the Master Storyteller Academy. Now, during week 3 of the Master Storyteller Academy, I'm going to show you how you actually structure your story so that it is influential. So remember how I showed you the 3 pillars to an influential story? Influential stories have context, and how they also have conflict, and they also have a conclusion and some specific point that they make. I'm going to show you how you apply that structure to your story. So we're going to map out the context of your story. We're going to map out what the conflict is in your story, and we're going to map out what the conclusion is in your story, and most important, what the takeaway is for your customers, for your clients, and for your audience. And so I'm going to show you how you apply the influential story structure to your story. That is what we're going to be covering during week 3 of the Master Storyteller Academy. Once again, you can go to masterstorytelleracademy.com so that you can go ahead and apply very quickly so that we can have, or someone on my team can have a conversation to give you more details about the Master Storyteller Academy, so you can decide whether or not you're going to be joining me and a very small group of individuals who are going to have the opportunity to go through this very powerful group coaching program. Now, during week 4 of the Master Storyteller Academy, here's what we're going to do. We're going to map out and develop your story timeline. And so what is your story timeline? It is when we basically go through a process and we identify what are the key elements in your story that you always want to make sure that every single time that you share your story, that you include those key elements. And in that story timeline is also where we determine what parts of your story that we're going to exclude, what parts of your story are irrelevant, what parts of your story actually take away from your story. So we map out the story timeline so that anytime you sort of get lost and you're trying to figure out what's important in my story, what should I share in my story, you can go back to your story timeline and you'll literally be able to know exactly what the sequence is to be able to tell your story. You see, great storytellers understand that their stories need to follow a specific sequence. Great storytellers understand that every single time they share their story, they need to hit certain key elements. And so we build out your storytelling timeline so that you know exactly what those key elements are. And so once again, if you want to be a part of the Master Storyteller Academy, if you'd like to get more information and speak to somebody on my team, or maybe even perhaps have an opportunity to speak to me personally so that you can get all the details for the Master Storyteller Academy, all you have to do is go to masterstorytelleracademy.com. And when you get there, you're going to click the link and simply fill out the very quick, simple application. And you'll hear from somebody in my office within the next 48 hours so that we can go ahead and set you up for a live conference call so that we can provide you with the details with everything that you're going to get with the Master Storyteller Academy, as well as what the investment is, so that you can make a decision as to whether or not the Master Storyteller Academy is the right fit for you. So not only during week 4, we're going to map out your timeline, during week 5, we get to do one of my favorite things, and that is where we do what I call the storytelling hot seats. And so this is the time where you start practicing telling your stories in literally very short period time frames. And so this is where we begin to do practice drills where you share your stories in 3 minutes or less, in 5 minutes or less. And don't panic. I know some of you are saying, oh my gosh, can you share a story in 3 minutes or less? Can you share a story in 5 minutes or less? You absolutely can. But in order to do that, you have to be very clear on the important aspects of your story. And so we'll be going through 3-minute exercises and 5-minute exercises so that you can learn how to be able to share your story and really be able to still be able to include the key elements so that you can ensure that you still are making sure that you're hitting the key elements of being influential, so that you're making a specific point for the audience, that you're connecting with them all in less than 3 minutes, in less than 5 minutes. I know it may sound crazy to you, but trust me on this. I've literally helped so many people to be able to do that, and it just takes a certain process that you have to undergo. And so that's what we're going to be focused on during week 5, is you're going to get the opportunity to practice sharing and telling your stories and getting some awesome feedback. And so here's the awesome thing. The final thing is during week 6, the final week of the Master Storyteller Academy, it is going to be a live event. This is where we all come together, and we're going to be showing up specifically the people who are part of the Master Storyteller Academy. And we are going to do a full day of live practice where you're going to get an opportunity to share your story, get live feedback from me and some of your peers, and be able to tweak and adjust the story so that you can take the story to an entirely different level. And the beautiful thing is about the Master Storyteller Academy is by the time you have graduated from the Master Storyteller Academy, by the time you've gone through the entire process, your confidence level is going to go through the roof when it comes to your story. You're going to be clear on what your strategic, what your significant, what your signature story is. You're going to be very clear on what the main takeaway point is for your story. You're going to be very clear on what the universal theme is in your story. You're going to understand how to structure your story so that it is influential. And so most importantly, you're going to be able to now leverage that skill set so that you can have more impact if you're out there speaking or you begin to speak. You're going to be able to have a more impactful book if you're looking to write a book. You're going to be able to attract the right paying customers and clients because now you're going to give them a story that they can actually connect to. And so I love just sort of seeing the transformation that takes place in my coaching clients, in my coaching students. And that's why I'm really inviting and giving you an opportunity, if you really want to take your storytelling to the next level, to join my Master Storyteller Academy. And so once again, you're going to go to masterstorytelleracademy.com. And when you get there, you're going to see a very quick application that you can fill out so that you can go ahead and get all the information that's necessary so that you can make a decision as to whether or not the Master Storyteller Academy is for you. And let me just tell you this, you know, one of the things I take great pleasure in is just sort of watching the transformation that takes place. For people, when they first start working with me, when they're unclear on what their signature story is, or maybe perhaps that their confidence level isn't where they want it to be, or they're doing some speaking, but they're realizing that they could be so much more influential, and just sort of seeing what happens when they really do a deep dive and really start to understand their story and start really being able to develop, you know, and map out their story timeline, to be able to set up their story so that it's influential, and be able to tell their story in a way that they're able to produce the level of results that they want. And so if you're a person that you know that this is, in fact, your time, that this is a skill set that you want to develop, because you know it's a skill set that you're going to be able to use not just this year, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And even though there's a lot of other techniques and strategies that you may learn them today, but guess what? 5 years from now, guess what? Those strategies may not work anymore. But your story, that's something that you're always going to be able to use. And so if this is a skill set that you want to leverage, join me in the Master Storyteller Academy. Make your way over to masterstorytelleracademy.com and fill out the quick application. And someone from my team will reach out to you and provide you with all the details that are necessary so that you can make a decision as to whether or not you're going to be part of the Master Storyteller Academy. And so finally, listen, our time is pretty much almost up. And I just want to remind you that literally your story is what is going to give you the competitive advantage in the marketplace. Listen, there's probably a lot of people out there that are in your field that do something similar to you. And you got to find a way to separate yourself. And I believe that one of the most underutilized tools is really your story, right? Listen, you've heard this expression before that content is king. And I tell you, I would challenge that. It's not just content is king, but it is very unique content is king, right? Your unique content that is unique to you, that you develop, that you actually share in your flavor and your style, that shares your story. And guess what? Nobody else out there has your story. And so if you want to separate yourself from the competition, then you got to get serious about sharing your story and sharing it in a way that you give people something to connect with, something that they can actually relate to, something that is going to create some significant impact, and really make them want to do business with you, or make them want to act on what it is that you're actually sharing. And remember what I told you earlier on, you know, your story is the peanut butter. Remember I shared the story about my dog Jasmine. She didn't want to take her vitamins, but when I put in the peanut butter, all of a sudden she would just go ahead and eat it and devour it. And so what happens is You think about your services, your products, your message. Oftentimes that is the vitamin. That's what you're sort of trying to push on and get people to get, because you believe that it's going to benefit them. But guess what? Some people aren't interested, right? And so how do you make it more palatable? How do you make it more attractive? You put it in the peanut butter. What's the peanut butter? The peanut butter is your story. And so when you become very effective at sharing your story, guess what? You become that much more impactful. And so I'm hoping that you're going to be joining us for the Master Storyteller Academy. And once again, in order for you to do that, all you have to do is go to masterstorytelleracademy.com. You'll see a place where you can go ahead and click a link and fill out the quick application. Someone from my team will contact you within the next 48 hours to provide you all the details so that you can make a decision as to whether or not this is the right coaching program for you. Listen, my name's Andy Henriquez. I really just want to thank you for spending this time with me, for investing in yourself, and most importantly, for being willing to expand and really grow and develop your skill set, because I believe this particular skill set, if you work on it and you develop it, it's going to help you to take things to an entirely different level. So once again, I thank you so much for tuning in to the Secrets of Becoming a Master Storyteller live stream training. I thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you at some other point. Hopefully, you will become a future coaching client, and we'll have an opportunity to connect. Once again, you're going to go to masterstorytelleracademy.com. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Have a very great day. God bless you.